Hey everyone, so for this podcast, we're going to be flipping the script around, as our usual AudioInsight podcasts are targeted towards visually impaired individuals, but this one is all about the family members and other important people in the lives of the visually impaired. Thank you for joining us. My name is Asin Shah.
And I'm his classmate Rob. We're both MD students at UT Health San Antonio.
And let's get started with the resources that can better help you care and support your visually impaired loved ones. So first and foremost, as you've probably seen Matthew and Natalie's podcast on the topic already, VibrantWorks is a great resource that has a treasure trove of information for people with vision loss. Formerly known as the San Antonio Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired, VibrantWorks provides support and rehabilitation programs for the visually impaired, creates employment opportunities for those with vision loss, and arms people with the knowledge required to tackle the modern world with a visual disadvantage. Please listen to the VibrantWorks podcast for more information.
Secondly, APH Connect Center has a great section called Vision Aware Families and Friends, where family members and friends can read about blindness and better understand how it is affecting the life of their loved one. Here, they explain that while everyone expects the diagnosis of an eye condition to be a physical disability, it is just as equally an emotional experience. I think a lot of us can take our vision for granted, but people who experience a loss of their vision go through multiple stages of grief and acceptance before they are able to positively cope with the sudden change. It's a critical time of their lives where they need a support system that they can fall back on as they learn how to be independent again. In saying this, there's also times where you have to decide when to step in and when to step back. As stated on the APH website, it can take a while before the person with low vision can gauge which activities they need help with. And while there's no easy way to know when to help them with something, you can always ask before acting. Keeping communication open with your friend or loved one with low vision is imperative to understanding what your role in their recovery is. You can also find services to financially support the adjustment to living with blindness, and tips to help integrate into the community where you can find a plethora of extra support. Further resources can be accessed with the links in the description of this podcast.
So our third resource comes from an article from the Community Eye Health Journal titled Assisting the Blind and Visually Impaired, Guidelines for Eye Health Workers and Other Helpers. This is a scientific literature piece targeted towards eye health workers and the most efficient way to interact with visually impaired people, but we believe that it has a lot of useful tips for family members taking care of their loved ones. In summary, the research emphasizes the maintenance of autonomy for blind people and how your job is to assist your loved ones but not take over their lives. Respect their abilities, ask before offering any help, and follow the golden rule of treating others how you would like to be treated. A critical portion of this is in your approach to interacting with people with low vision. Treat them like anyone else. Use normal language like look and see, because as the article emphasizes, visually impaired people have exactly the same vocabulary as the rest of us. Never assume extra disabilities, and never treat them like someone who's completely helpless. A significant part of helping your loved one rehabilitate is treating them as if they're independent and equals. It is never frowned upon to ask them exactly what they would like you to do in certain situations, so there's no confusion. The article ends with explanations of how to approach physical obstacles, like curbs and stairs, when you're helping your loved one ambulate, and it usually boils down to the same principles. Call out the obstacles for them and allow your relatives to communicate to you how they would like you to aid them. This, and just generally being risk-averse, is a great template to follow when out and about.
The fourth resource that we're going to emphasize here is an article on the Eye Care Institute website titled How to Create a Safe Home for the Visually Impaired and Totally Blind. This article focuses on how to make your house a safe and comfortable home for a blind or visually impaired person. It gives tips on how to modify bedrooms, bathrooms, and the kitchen to make them as safe and accessible as possible. Many of these are what you would expect. The article talks about arranging the furniture so it is in a safe and predictable configuration, getting rid of safety hazards like slippery rugs and random objects on the ground, and modifying the kitchen so all sharp utensils and stove burner dials are marked. If your relative or friend is completely blind, they require a couple extra steps to ensure their safety. The article mentions braille labels, a phone entry system, coating your floors with anti-slip material, and talking devices to help identify objects around your house as basic changes that can go the extra mile in making a person with blindness feel more comfortable in their house. Many of these tips are centered around giving a tactile feel to ordinary house items so they can be easily identified. They even have tips on how to accommodate a service dog in your home, such as making sure the house is as obstacle-free as possible so your furry friend, and you, can confidently lead your relative around the house without hindrance.
The fifth and final resource we're going to highlight in this podcast is an article in the Lighthouse Guild targeted for parents with a child that has been newly diagnosed with vision loss. For a lot of people, their child is the first visually impaired person that they meet in their lives, and this can lead to a lot of uncertainty and fear for the future. This resource aims to quell the concerns of a new parent, gives them a step-by-step guide on what to do from the very beginning. The first part of the article focuses on those born without vision or who lost it within the first 3 years of your life. It stresses the importance of interacting with your baby whether or not you have the suspicion of low vision, as the newborn will still know you are in the room and will bond with their mother using their other senses. While a formal diagnosis may come later, the newborn period will still consist of a curious baby who is trying to understand the world around them. The article stresses the importance of enrolling with an early intervention agency early, sometimes free of charge through a pediatrician or ophthalmologist, which basically allows you as a parent to get in touch with personnel who will coordinate the appropriate therapies your child will require. They then go on to talk about the toddler years, where generally, stimulation of the other senses is very motivating and rewarding for a child with vision loss. This can include bright and loud toys, explaining the parts of their body when you're washing them during bath time, or while you are helping them get dressed, and allowing your child to get a feel for the texture of the food before you feed them. The suggestions center around making sure the environment is as predictable and accessible as possible, allowing the toddler to hone their other senses to compensate for their low vision. It is also helpful to establish a daily and nightly routine for your child, at least in the early years, so they can begin to associate different objects with uses at different times of the day. Finally, the article talks about educational programs, such as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, which guarantees free and appropriate education for children with disabilities, as well as special education between the ages of 3 and 5, where children can qualify to be placed in an LRE, or at least restrictive environment, to better foster their learning. So we appreciate everyone watching this for taking time out of their day to learn more about how to better support the lives of their visually impaired loved ones. These are great resources to help bridge the gap between blind people and the healthcare that they deserve. The link to all these resources will be in the description, and we encourage you to read them if you want to learn about any of these topics in greater depth. We can ask you to please fill out the survey linked in the description of this podcast, as we would love to hear how we did and how we can make the future podcasts even better. Have an amazing rest of your day.